Well. Looks like we have a turncoat in the Conservative Party who went over to the Liberal side. Unfortunately, this is kind of the weird politics that we're dealing with right now today. Well, right now we got an exclusive interview with Melissa Lantsman, and let's take a look.
The Conservative Party is getting wired up right now, and I'm hoping Melissa Lantsman can answer some very specific questions.
Awesome.
I think you're there and ready to go, Melissa Lantsman. What's going on with Chris D'Entremont?
We're not talking about the budget.
We'll get to that.
I would hope we could take a few minutes to talk about
we absolutely will.
Generational debt that we've just been piled.
Well, we will, but let's just talk about the sudden resignation. Chris D'Entremont has resigned from your caucus. What is the view from your office there?
Look, Chris has, like Lisa said, Chris has made a choice, and I think the choice is, not to fight inflation, not to fight to lower grocery prices and lower the cost of homes like his constituents elected him to do. And I suspect that if Chris was deputy speaker, that he probably wouldn't resign.
Okay, so I get the pushback, but just help me walk me through the process. Was there a warning that Mr. D'Entremont was feeling this way, or did you learn about it in the Politico article today?
This is Chris's decision, so I think you can ask him how that all came to be. I certainly didn't know about it, but I'm telling you that Chris made a choice today not to fight for what his constituents sent him here to fight for.
Chris literally made this decision for his own career, and he basically committed career suicide by doing this. Like, this guy has been in with the Conservatives for some time now. He actually won in Nova Scotia by I think it was 500 votes at that time, and he turned his back on them. Like, how upset would you be in Nova Scotia right now when your MP turns to the other side, which you didn't even want to be running for your area at all?
Your understanding that he is sitting as an independent?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know what the letter says. Maybe you can tell me, or if there's a letter.
Well, I do not know this either. I was texting with people in Mr. Poilievre's office saying we heard he's getting thrown out and that it's happening now.
He certainly wasn't thrown out. Let's make that clear.
I know, but that was the point, is that I was told that he has resigned from the Conservative caucus, but not as a member of Parliament. Your understanding, he is still.
That is my understanding, yeah.
Okay, all right, well, we obviously need Chris D'Entremont to come down, but this is not a good thing to have happen, Ms. Lantsman, for the Conservatives. The Liberals need 3 votes to get this budget through. Your leader has a leadership review coming up, and here you have one of your few Atlantic MPs leaving.
Yeah, well, look, I don't think those things are necessarily connected. I think Chris has a lot of time to figure out how he's going to vote on the budget. He ran predicated on the fact that he was going to make life more affordable for Canadians. If that's what he is going to do, then I can't see how he possibly votes for this budget. But I think time will tell on that, and we can talk about all of the speculation about who votes how, but today we can talk about this budget, which I think was a really expensive one and a really long speech as well. So we heard it all. I think you read the budget into the record.
Well, it is the moment for the finance minister today.
It's a lot of moments.
But the deficit, $78.3 billion this year. It's not the $100 billion that some projections had. It is right around that 75 to 80.
Well, I don't think you get a prize for not being $100 billion.
No. But it's in that 75 to 80 billion sort of range, well above the 42 billion that your leader put on the table, and the industrial
above the 60 that he promised. Also, just in the election campaign, he costed his platform at about $60 billion, and he broke that promise too. Well above what every family can afford. This is $90 billion in new spending. It's $300 billion of new debt at the end of that 5-year cycle, which is $20,000 per family of new debt in this country. This is the biggest. This is the biggest budget outside of COVID. It is double what the last prime minister, who actually spent more than all prime ministers combined in his tenure.
There's actually about $154 billion in new spending, but it's offset a little bit by about $50 to $60 billion in reductions.
That's right.
So it nets out to a $90 billion increase, but the spending goes even beyond that.
That's right. And if he doesn't if he doesn't make those the cuts that he says he's going to make, then we can be in the $100 billion range.
But sort of the assessment, I know the Conservative view is different than this, but a lot of economists, and we heard from the central bank, from Tiff Macklem, that Monetary policy has done all it can to deal with what's happening with Donald Trump. Fiscal policy and industrial policy need to take the lead here to sort of help give the economy the tools it needs to reorient itself, and workers and businesses the supports they need to survive. So that is a big part of what's happening here. Is there any value in that you see as you look through the measures on the tax side?
I think there are lots of ways that you can get that done. You can get the regulations out of way. You can rather than raising the industrial carbon tax, you can lower the industrial carbon tax, or frankly scrap it altogether. You can get rid of the stuff that stops us from building what we need to build in this country. But more importantly, if you're a Canadian looking at this who has been struggling to put food on the table, who's been struggling to put a roof over their head, who has been struggling with the affordability of everyday life, there is nothing in this budget for you. And I think Canadians right across the country, from coast to coast to coast, are going to look at it and say, what about me? What are they doing to help me today? And I think that's what we're hearing from coast to coast, and I think that's what every other opposition party will hear when they speak to Canadians.
Yeah, there is a list of affordability measures in the budget on page 24, but it is things that we have heard prior to budget day, right? The elimination of the carbon tax.
And today, life is worse than when we heard those. So, they haven't answered the call for affordability.
Well, I know your point that it's a different deficit and a different approach than what we saw in the election, but a lot has happened since March and then April 28th with the vote, so you need to adjust to the circumstances. Is there no justification, in your view, to move in the direction they've moved and add to the deficit?
These are Mark Carney's promises. He promised that we would have a fastest growing economy in the G7, and in fact, their words don't match what's actually in the math of their budget, because their budget clearly outlines that investment is fleeing this country every quarter until the end of the year since he's been Prime Minister. He said that he would have the lowest debt to GDP ratio. He just changed the word debt to deficit. And
I think it's around $65 billion right now has left Canada because there's so much uncertainty within the economy right now. That's cringe. Like, you should feel sick to your stomach of how much money that is. And the Liberal Party just love spending everybody else's money. They don't care because they know they don't care. They're getting their paycheck. They're secure within their writing. They're happy. They don't care about the people in the tents and the food banks. It's really appalling to me that people still today keep believing in this liberal government.
He's revised that anchor. So that's not there anymore. These are Mark Carney's promises. They're not my promises, and they're what Canadians expected. So if you're going to measure him against his expectations, I think he's failed that test with this budget.
Okay, so it's very clear then the Conservatives will be voting against this budget.
We cannot support this budget. We cannot support doubling the deficit, doubling the debt in this country, and not a single measure of affordability for anyone who is desperately asking for it in Canada.
Okay, but the counterfactual on the other 2 points you raised there, getting the deficit down to the $42 billion means either much larger cuts to the civil service, well beyond the 16,000 full-time equivalent jobs they're eliminating here, orders of magnitude beyond that, or not doing the infrastructure investment, the tax incentives that they're doing, because there's a cost to those. So how do you get the deficit down to a level that you would be comfortable with without taking the axe even deeper or not doing the incentive programs?
Well, look, I think there's lots of time to talk about what exactly the details of the budget in terms of consultants, in terms of foreign aid funding, in terms of how much further we can you can cut those things. But I think what's important here is to tell Canadians who desperately asked for measures of affordability to lower the price of food, to lower the price of homes, to lower the price of gas, that none of this is going to happen because the fundamentals are still here. It's the same ministers making the same policies, making the same promises 10 years later. They promised you investment 10 years ago.
You talk about regulation, though. They are laying out a path to get rid of or just never implement the oil and gas emissions cap. But it hinges on, hang on, just so the audience can follow along. It hinges on the agreement of a 2030 to 2050 trajectory on industrial carbon pricing. I know you don't like the emissions cap. I know you don't like industrial carbon pricing. Is there a climate policy that you would support?
So look, they could have said today that they would get rid of the emissions cap. They could have said today that they could get rid of the EV mandates. They could have said today that they would lower instead of increase the industrial carbon tax, which, by the way, is directly responsible for the rise in food and housing and everything we built.
No, that's not like there is no. The economic analysis on the impact on food puts it at 0.5 to 0.8%. This is what Trevor Toome and others looked at.
So you're telling me that the industrial carbon tax on fertilizer, on fuel, on farming equipment does not pass down in the price of food
97% of emissions on a farm are exempt from the carbon tax.
I don't know how you can look Canadians in the eye and say that the price of food hasn't skyrocketed and these are the reasons for it.
Well, the price of food has skyrocketed.
Packaging taxes.
There's also currency changes. There's climate change that has led to drought.
You're a better defender of the government's budget than they are.
I have.
She just nailed him on that one right there. Because we all know the CBC always leans hard towards the left. And he's always doing his best to, like, pump the brakes whenever she's on a roll and tries to interrupt her with, like, you know, some made-up magical facts that he has no basis on. But, yeah, absolutely nailed it out of the park on that one.
Read Trevor Toome's analysis, and I go with the experts on this. Like, I think, anyway, they are looking at this as the backbone now of a new climate policy from 2030 to 2050. You're not going to support that, even if this is something with methane reduction and carbon capture can allow oil and gas production to go
With what this budget
ahead.
has put forward in terms of the generational debt and the deficits that we're seeing, we cannot support this budget, and Conservatives will not support this budget.
Okay, one last question. I'm going to circle back to Chris d'Entremont. I know you haven't spoken to him. He obviously has been speaking to the Liberals in some capacity in the run-up to this, and he suggests that either the Prime Minister's office or people on the PMO's behalf have been speaking to other members of your caucus. Are you worried that there could be more Chris d'Entremonts in the coming days?
Well, look, I have no idea if any of that is true. If you have any names, we can talk about those.
I know.
We can
I'm
talk
just
about
going
those,
with the reporting.
Yeah, so those are rumors. But I would say again on Chris, he's made a choice today, and that choice is not to stand up for the constituents that sent him here.
Wow, it's really telling when they cut the interview abruptly just like that, and how much they didn't get what their narrative was going across, right? But this is like the absolute worst time, and there's been rumors kind of like coming around about there's going to be more MPs who want to go over to the Liberal side, and a lot of them actually have come forward and like squashed that rumor. Like someone on Facebook and they did a video, or they said something within the media. But this is at the absolute worst time, and it was actually kind of leaked as well, is that Chris d'Entremont didn't find out about this until he was actually within Parliament. So everybody was looking at him. They were getting like look at their phones, be like, "Why is this guy still here?" Then, and then he had no idea it went public because somebody in the Conservatives leaked that he was going to be doing this, or a Liberal leaked that he was going to be doing this, and it just went viral after that. So he basically ducked out of Parliament during that time, and yeah, like, he was so frantic that his letter of resignation was basically said of the November 5th, 2005. So he's like, he didn't proofread, and half the names on there were also incorrect. So the guy was obviously panicking that he got found out really quickly. I think also what he was trying to do was that it was originally planned that the deficit would have been presented first, and then he would have kind of like let kind of percolate a little bit, and then drop the hammer down to make Pierre Poilievre look awful, like basically proving that nobody's supporting, or they do support the deficit, right? Because he's changing from the Conservatives over to the Liberal side. So yeah, it's crazy. This is every day. This breaking news going on all the time. So make sure you guys follow, like, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys on the next one. It's going to be a lot of fun.